Death is not the end. Beginning of the new flesh. The new flesh. Birth.
Horror lifestyle.
Forgive me if I don't stay around to watch. I just can't cope with the freaky stuff.
Hey everybody, welcome to the New Flesh Podcast, a podcast about horror movies and all things tangentially related to horror movies, horror news, horror franchises, and of course, the overall horror lifestyle. My name is Brett Arnold at Gene Parmesan on Letterboxd.com, the only social media site where I am. There's no place else where I spend 75% of my day. Definitely not. I'm just on Letterboxd. And Jesse is rock marooned on there and other places that shall not be named. And we are here today for an all too rare new release horror movie triple feature, and I think they all fit the bill fairly well. Maybe more horror adjacent, the last one. They all are pretty genre-y. We've got Flying Lotus's Ash, starring Isaac Gonzalez and Aaron Paul. We've got Locked, a Sam Raimi-produced movie starring Bill Skarsgård and Anthony Hopkins. Mostly the voice of Anthony Hopkins, but he also does appear. And then we have Hoodwitch, which is a really cool, propulsive, and clever movie that was not what I was expecting, and I think that it's better for it. So that's a fun bill today. Or Jesse has another idea. We cover the Alto Knights 3 different times in different characters. We're going to do makeup. And we will each. I'll be Jesse for the second review, and he'll be me. And
Perfect.
then we'll both be each different De Niro for the third one.
Yes,
I think
yes.
that works out.
We'll outdo Alto Knights, which only has 2 De Niros. We'll give you many more.
Many more De Niros sounds great. As I said on some podcast, and the BO Boys are also saying, if that movie were a clump situation, where De Niro was playing every character, and including like his wife, I think that would be a much more interesting movie. Because right now it's pretty flat. That's the word on Alto Knights. What else do we have to say up top before we get into the news of the week?
Coming out next weekend too.
I have a screener for something called Gazer. And we both watched Freaky Tales, which I don't think should count, but
no, and that comes out I think the week after even.
Oh really? Oh
yeah,
gosh.
that's April 4th. Yeah.
Oh yeah. The woman. The woman in the yard.
Yes, the woman. Of course. How could we forget the woman?
How could we forget?
She's in the yard.
She was
She's
in
right
the window.
there.
She fell. She's in the yard.
Today's the day, as they say over and over in the trailer.
We're gonna watch The Woman in the Yard. With the regular citizens of the world. There's no press screening, or there is, but it's after it debuts. We talked about this a lot last week or 2 weeks ago. But yeah, The Woman in the Yard, I was trying to get there. I knew there was one, and I couldn't think of it. Jean-Claude Serrat returned to the genre, the horror genre. Very excited for that, despite the fact that Universal is not excited about it at all. They are hiding it as much as possible, so it's probably bad. But how bad could it be? Daniel Deadwyler was great in what was it called? Not Nonstop.
Carry On.
Yeah, the other movie with a dash in it that Jean-Claude Serrat made. Yeah. Okay. So that's what's going on next week. We told you what's going on this week. Anything to talk about, Jesse, before we go right into?
I think I'm dying to hear the news. I feel like I'm behind on the news.
Okay, well,
despite being online 24 hours a day.
Well, there's some breaking news out of an Academy Museum screening of John Carpenter's The Thing, which was hosted or maestroed by Bong Joon-ho, and they had a nice conversation, which my online internet buddy Zed Cutsinger posted on his letterbox, like the full transcript of what they talked about, which was great to read. But the news pertinent for listeners of this show is that right before they finished up, Bong was like, "Oh, by the way, would you ever do another score for a horror movie? Because my next movie," or he says my next movie, maybe it's 2 movies from now, but he basically says, "I'm doing a horror movie, and I would really love if you did the score." And John Carpenter eagerly replied, "I want to do your score." The crowd went nuts. They made a handshake, and they assured everyone that this was real and it was happening. So John Carpenter appears to be doing a horror movie score for Bong Joon-ho. And I think the news here, the buried lead, is that Bong Joon-ho's doing a horror movie.
Yeah.
At least, if not next, the one after that, or planning on it. This is very exciting news on both fronts. Love a Bong Joon-ho movie, despite not loving Mickey 17. Love that he's doing another foray into horror genre. You could say, has he? I don't think he's ever. The Host is, horror monstery. He's done horror stuff. I think it's really exciting that he might be doing that, and that Carpenter is so eager to be like, "Fuck yeah, I'm down to do that." He's done the score for the recent Halloweens and stuff, so he's not like not working. But as fans of his know who read interviews with him, he'd just rather be playing NBA 2K on his PlayStation. So it's nice that he's gonna do that. Also, he will receive his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame April 3rd. John Carpenter, very exciting, well deserved. He got it right after Gal Gadot.
It's a perfect order. No notes. It's all yes. It's perfectly ordered.
So the biggest horror news of the week is that the rumor is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre rights are up for sale. Verve has repped the rights for the slasher series since 2017, and they're looking to, basically sell it off and make something. So at a time when horror franchises are one of the only surefire bets, the 51-year-old horror property has still potential to make a killing. One of the parties we hear interested is allegedly J.T. Molnar, the guy who just did Strange Darling, and producer Roy Lee, who does Barbarian and that, and I think It. That movie was a big success indie-wise. If Molnar gets a script together, word is that Glenn Powell would like to read it. Deadline warned it's very early days, blah, 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 but that Lionsgate, A24, and others are expressing interest. Don't be shocked if Neon jumps into the fray, considering Longlegs and the Monkey did well, and they've got the other Oz Perkins coming up. I want to just say, JT Molnar tweeted after this came out, "Don't believe everything you read." So he's throwing cold water on his involvement. But I do believe Deadline that there's things happening with regard to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre property. So if anyone who's a listener and wants to, work on a script for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think we have till Friday probably to come up with a really good spec at the very least, an outline. How would you update Texas Chainsaw Massacre for modern times? If you got a pitch, I'll listen and we can write it. We'll get executive producer credit. We'll make it work somehow. Is this the kick in the ass I need to finally write something, Jesse?
Absolutely. This is
we're doing it. JT Molnar says he's out. I'm in.
Yeah, you're going to sidle up and say, "Hey, look, if JT Molnar doesn't want to do it." I wonder if his denial, his sort of non-specific denial, was more on the Glenn Powell end of things, because it's very hard for me to picture Glenn Powell being like, "Yes, Texas Chainsaw, let go." Is there any precedence for someone on Glenn Powell's level of success going and doing a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie? I don't think there is.
I mean, right? I feel like Beale was boosted by that movie, and it was
right.
Yeah,
But she hadn't just done a couple of big hits and then jumped into Texas Chainsaw. So that seems so unlikely to me that Glenn Powell would be into it. Is it just because there's Texas in it? Is he from? I don't even know if he's from Texas.
Yeah, he does live in Texas, I believe, and
it just seems so unlikely. I'm excited. It's interesting too that this is of course it would make sense because it's a big horror property, but at the same time, how many hit movies have they made out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre? 2, right? The first one and the Bay
and
produced
the remake. Yeah, and I'm sure the beginning must have done not well.
I'm sure it didn't do great, but I feel like it did 40 domestic or something, where it probably turned a profit or probably broke even, but it wasn't it didn't start a new.
Is that Jay
franchise. Brew? Yeah, that was Jay Brew in that one. Yeah. Another, nothing against her, but like that was after, she kind of stopped doing Fast and Furious.
Is that the
movies
movie
she
that has the most unconvincing 70s aesthetic? It's like, hey, it's 1970 something, and you're like, Jordana
Yeah,
Brewster has cell phone face. I'm sorry, she's not.
She has like, and she also
Yeah.
has like low-rise jeans that were just like not. I was just like, no.
There's
I
a
don't think
couple
so.
shots where she's just on her phone on accident, and they kept it in the movie.
That's right.
Oh God. But yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. People will probably remember, maybe not. You and I were much cooler, I think, or hotter on it than people were. Most
Right,
critics
the
were.
Netflix one that nobody talks about.
The
because
Netflix one that
it's
people think,
forgotten.
if they talk about it, they think it's horrible. And you and
Yes.
and I think
I
there's a
thought it was-
handful.
I thought it was.
There's
thought
a
it was
handful
kinda
of
good.
others. I definitely was cooler on or hotter on it than you were, but I really liked it. I thought it was like ambitious in fun ways, and it like did things you hadn't seen before, like that massacre in the van. Like it just went hard in certain respects, and I appreciated it. And that was a Fede Alvarez produced thing, and I believe it was directed by someone named Blue Garcia or something. And he was. I thought they were going to do another one, but apparently not, because the rights are on the town and people are trying to buy them. So if you're a New Flesh listener with an idea, we want to hear it. The New Flesh production starts now.
That's right.
Sydney Sweeney will be starring in a Reddit r/no sleep thriller called I Pretended to Be a Missing Girl. The full title of the post on Reddit is I Pretended to Be a Missing Girl so I could rob her family. And it was published on the popular Reddit channel No Sleep 4 years ago. The story, a short story, centers on the young woman who shows up at a family's doorsteps 10 years after their 18-year-old daughter went missing. Her plan is to convince the family she's their missing child and stay just for one night, long enough to steal some stuff and get away. That sounds like a fun idea.
Yeah, it does.
And usually I'd be like, when I was interning at was it Lionsgate, I think it was? I interned at a couple places in LA for no money at the time when that was in vogue. One of the things they had us do was like read magazines and newspapers to try and find like an optionable story.
Uh-huh.
And I think that job would be so much easier now because you can just go to Reddit and be
Yeah.
like, what about this shit? Someone wrote
know,
this
I
like
was-
an hour ago and it's doing
All the
well.
articles about this confused me because they all referred to it as a short story. And I was like, do you mean the post?
Yeah, they do
As-
mean the
I don't
post.
mean to be a
Yeah.
snob, but as someone who kind of likes actual short stories in like books, I was like, that's not the same thing. A short story, do you mean like that's a weird way of saying a post or an anecdote or something. Like he told me a short story about this. Like, no, that's not when you're talking about optioning something, you should really be more precise. Like a short story is a it's like an
What's the
intentional
de- I
work
mean,
of literature.
Do they have
Like-
to pay this person whose post it is? I would imagine there's some sort of like they're
They must have
treating it
found-
like a book, right? Like
Yeah, they must. That's the thing. Like, I mean, that's why also is someone who's written short stories and someone who knows short story writers. And to hear about people trawling Reddit for stuff. God, there's so many short story collections, and that where people would be
yeah,
so
but the,
delighted to be
the
offered
interns
25 grand.
don't have a login to that. They have Reddit.
Right. They
Yeah.
don't have. That requires knowing which ones to get or whatever. But yeah, but you could just post something on Reddit that could be equally made up, but just not as well written, but it sounds believable. And someone, I wonder how much that fetched.
Yeah.
Was that 25 grand, 50 grand?
Well,
Like, that's
if you have a Reddit account, you can reach out to let me click on this post, whoever this guy is, and just DM him and
Yeah.
be like, "Hey man, what
How
did
much
Sydney
did you give for
Sweeney
that?"
offer you for this?"
Yeah.
So that's
She's just
interesting,
actually
though.
gonna have him go out to lunch. And
Yeah, I was
then-
gonna say he's probably like drives a really hard bargain of like, "Will you kiss me on the mouth one time?" Yeah. That's the deal. That's why she did it.
Yeah.
She's like, "All right,
Yeah.
this is all profit."
Yeah. It does sound like a cool. I mean, it sounds like a great idea for a movie.
Yeah.
So I guess I gotta give the Reddits their due on that one.
Start posting your short stories on Reddit. It's the it's the
Just
quickest
like
way
with a
to
little
Hollywood.
intro
Yeah.
that's like, this really happened to me.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, something really happened to you where like nothing really happens ever. It was sad. Great. here's 25 grand.
that sounds like a short story. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Resident Evil. We know that Zach Kreger is doing that movie over at Sony, who got the rights back from themselves or whatever. September 18th, 2026 has a release date. The big news that we just learned is Austin Abrams is joining the cast. Star of Wolves. Wolves. Excuse me, not wolves.
Oh, like he was like the kid in that
yeah,
or something?
the kid from
Okay.
Wolves. Wolves.
Sure. Yeah.
The movie that we all know and love.
Yes.
Wolves.
The Apple smash hit.
Yeah. Oh, brother. Josh Trank, a name you haven't heard in years, probably, he has a horror movie coming up. It's called Send a Scare. It's written by him and his friend Andrew Ryan from an original story by Andrew Ryan. Send a Scare centers on an interactive horror startup that gives thrill seekers a way to send scares to friends and family. But when potential investors host a demonstration, the experience gets hijacked by a real masked killer with a deadly agenda. Sounds fun. Victoria Justice of Suits LA is in it, and Robbie Amell, I'm not sure who that is, but I know his name is a thing.
Yeah, I've heard his name before.
Yeah, it feels like these are TV people maybe, which I don't know.
Yeah,
TV...
Victoria Justice was like a Nickelodeon kid. She was like on
Oh.
a show called Victorious, and then now is grown up, obviously. You ever see the movie Fun Size, starring her
No,
and
I didn't.
Thomas Middleditch?
But
yeah,
I
because you're an
remember-
adult, so
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Fun. If it was called like Full Size, because like
Yeah,
Fun
well, of course,
Size.
yeah, what the fuck do you want with this Fun Size candy bar?
Yeah,
But
it's-
it is
yeah.
notably a Halloween movie, actually, like that takes
Oh.
place entirely on Halloween. Not a Halloween of the series, obviously, but Halloween.
Thomas
centric.
Middleditch is Michael Myers in.
Yeah. Yes.
Amazing. I wanted to mention that the Shrouds, which again I'm hoping to hear back from them and schedule this press day with David Cronenberg. They've set the date, and I know what it is, and I'm hoping they let me in. But he's also doing Q&As at 4 NYC screenings. So if you are local and you want to see Cronenberg do a Q&A, one's at Link of Angelica, April 16th at 7, April 17th at 6:30 at Lincoln Center, April 18th at 6:15 at Lincoln Center, and April 18th at 7:45 at Angelica. So that's for the Shrouds heads, Cronenberg heads. And Warner Brothers made some moves. Kreger's follow-up to Barbarian, the much-anticipated Magnolia of Horror Weapons, has been bumped up to August 8th of this year instead of January of next year. But they also moved their Maggie Gyllenhaal movie, The Bride, originally due out September of this year, until March of next year. And It Follows... the guy David Robert Mitchell's other movie that's not They Follow, the Flowervale Street movie, the dinosaur movie with Anne Hathaway, I think it is. That's moved from March to August of next year. What else do we know? I think those are all the moves. 'Cause Sinners is out April 18th.
They moved.
What else?
Yeah, they moved the. This is not horror, but they moved the Paul Thomas Anderson movie from that. That was in the slot that Kreger's movie is taking. And then that's moving into September. Whereas
Yeah,
The Bride is moving out. Yeah,
because they need to like build prints of it, is what they were saying, like 70 millimeter or whatever, like whatever. Very excited for the Paul Thomas Anderson movie. I'm reading the book that it's based on right now, and it's delightful and funny, and I'm having a great time. Looking forward to that. I'm breaking my rule of reading a book before seeing the movie because I feel like Paul Thomas Anderson. It's fine.
It'll be different. Yeah,
I'll be fine. All right, that's all the news I had. We have a triple feature: Ash, Locked, and Hoodwitch. In the order that you saw them, is that the right order?
Yes, that is the order I saw.
All right,
yes.
let's go then. Ash. You like this more than me, which I find strange. I'm surprised that you like this more than me.
Strange. I don't know. Is it because I saw it in a movie theater? I'm not sure.
Maybe.
I thought it was
it
really
definitely
cool. Like,
is a movie that's like, for me, the appeal of it that works is the visuals and the score and like the visceral elements. That type of stuff is the thing that works. And if there's anything that doesn't work, it's the fucking story. Yeah.
And even that, I will say, even as someone who liked it and was thumbs up on this movie, I will say that watching it, I was kind of going, when it goes this kind of visceral, this immediately, in terms of like, it's red and there's crazy points of view shots and it's trippy and cosmic horror. Like, it probably would have worked better. It probably would have worked better to work up to that stuff and like kind of start off a little more procedural and go a little crazier rather than immediately jump into like close up of an eyeball, flash of bloody gore. You know,
it's
I feel like
Jen
that stuff
Andalou all of a sudden right away.
Yeah, yeah. It will make you got to hold some of that back if you really want it, because it's not. I wouldn't say it's that effective as like a suspense movie until like the last 30 or 40, when it really it does find another way to kind of kick further into gear. But I would say, like, I would be sympathetic to the view that it's the flash of it sort of flashes too much too fast, and that it kind of, even though it doesn't start out fast in terms of story, but like it kind of does the sensory overload thing almost immediately, which can be difficult when you're trying to make sort of a cool descent into madness movie, because it is a very simple story, as you alluded. Is it Isa? Is that how you say your name? Isa Gonzalez.
I'm not sure. Isa. I'm not sure. I'll look it up while you speak.
Yeah, she wakes up like at a little space station on an outpost in some planet, and doesn't remember who she is disoriented. There are also some dead bodies around. She's a little confused, and then a second person from this mission that she's apparently been on, played by Aaron Paul, shows up. He's been in a ship, like a kind of a shuttle ship that's supposed to rendezvous with a bigger ship that's in orbit around the planet, and he shows up and is sort of like, we gotta go, like, if we want to catch the rendezvous thing. He seems blithely unconcerned with what may or may not have gone down in his absence, and she is sort of wants to know what's going on. They're basically on an Interstellar style, we're trying to colonize this planet, we're seeing what planets might be able to be colonized mission in the future. So it's kind of a mystery in terms of like, oh, what happened? What is she not remembering? And you do see pretty early on, I guess they're supposed to be, I don't remember if they're supposed to be anyone's actual memory or just sort of the objective, here's the objective truth flashback, where you see the crew, and where these are like normal scenes that are not red filtered and gory and flashes of crazy shit going on, and you see like this 6-person crew, interacting and talking about their mission and stuff. So it becomes sort of a, like, sort of a mystery, sort of a freak out about what's going on with this planet and what happened to her in this time she doesn't remember. And it probably would work a little better if it wasn't like going hard with the visual stuff right away. But I did find that the visual stuff was really cool and interesting. And it's very, you're right, it's very derivative of other movies.
Yeah, I would say if you haven't seen a sci-fi movie before, I think this would be amazing.
This is
like, you'd be
cool
like, holy shit. Yeah. Like, this is what the genre is capable of. But yeah, to me, the big issue I have is the only thing I could think of while watching it is, okay, that's an Event Horizon pull. Okay, that's an alien pull.
That's the thing.
That's the thing.
Horizon,
that's Prometheus, strangely. Like, they also did Prometheus in addition to the
I appreciated that. I was like, finally, someone coming around to Prometheus.
It'd be funny if there was somehow a Romulus reference in there, specifically.
They were really up to date, there's definitely little touches that are ganked from other movies, essentially, but I thought it was, at least what it was influenced by and how it was using those influences, was a little more interesting than your standard Alien knockoff, in terms of what I don't think it's spoiling anything to say that there's an alien presence in the movie, if we've already mentioned the Thing and the Alien and Prometheus, and the presence itself I thought was pretty cool and creepy, and it was really, considering how hard it tries to go early on in terms of like psychedelic visuals and all that, you would think this movie would really fall off. But I found the last 30 or 40 of it really good. It's got, like, it pays off pretty well. Not in terms of surprises or anything really, but just in terms of what you get to see, some crazy fight scenes.
Yeah, like, it's all build up and then it pays off. Yeah.
Yeah, at least it pays off, because a lot of movies like this, you could see it really just kind of, it started off intriguing, and then, so I think it was just I was thankful for the small favor of like, that actually got cooler, rather than it had a cool first 20 minutes and then falls off. I did find it confusing. Like, they scrambled the time a little bit, and I was left, I think it was one of those things where I started wondering about something, and then while I was wondering about it, I think I missed, the movie probably answered me while I was wondering, hey, what about this? She gets a gash on her forehead, and I was like kind of keeping track of the timelines by that, because the gash is then healed by like this self-surgery tool, which was this little mini Prometheus device, which I thought was really neat. There's a really funny, it gives you a rate your experience screen when it's done performing surgery, which I found very funny. I do wish the movie had a little more. I think my buddy Jacob at AV Club was I wish the movie had more of that type of thing, that little more kind of satirical edge to it. But I still thought it was pretty funny. But judging by her, trying to judge where we were in time by the gash on her forehead, proved not fruitful and only had me asking questions about like, wait, did this character not exist? Which I think I was asking you about that. I don't think it was true, but like there's a character who like at one point she's thinking about some memories and like he kind of blips in and out of the screen. Do you remember that? Like he's like there's like kind of a flash and the character's like disappeared from the scene, then flashes, you know, he kind of like you know. And I was like, "What? Wait, was he actually not there? Like, I don't know what any of that means." And it was a cool visual, and there were a lot of things like that in the middle of the movie where it seemed like they were trying to complicate it, perhaps unnecessarily. Whereas, again, I think you could probably simplify this movie and just make it like a kind of starts as a procedural, ends as a descent into madness. And I think they jumped the gun on some of that stuff. But I did have a pretty good time watching it and felt pretty satisfied by the end, even though it's kind of a trick. It doesn't really add up to much. Like,
no,
the ending doesn't give you like any kind of boost, really.
And
but
while you were confused by like the non-linear like jumping back thing, I was mostly like, I think this is going to resolve in the most obvious way possible, and I feel it did.
Yeah,
like, it was like
oh,
that's what happened. Like she did that. Like I was like, that's probably what it is, and it kind of just did that. So it felt
some
to
of
me,
the specifics of what she did that entailed. I was a little confused about, but it is ultimately that's the thing. Ultimately, the way the movie ends, it doesn't really matter, in a in a cool just go with it way. More in a like, well, I had a couple of these questions about what exactly happened, but it like doesn't really change the outcome of the movie at all.
Yeah, it's you know, if I said this on Roger Me, I think, well, I'm like, you know, if someone gave me money to make a sci-fi movie, I would probably make something exactly like this, where it's just like pulling pieces of my favorite things and putting them on screen in a way that, you know, I don't think I would have the visual style that Flying Lotus clearly has. I think he does shoot this interestingly, and you know, quick cuts and stuff can get annoying, but it is like that trippy way where it's like actually upsetting. In a, you know, where it's not just like MTV quick cuts or whatever you call the Saw style of editing, where it just like the camera circles around as someone screams.
Right. It is for something that's kind of a freak out. It is made with a fair amount of thoughtfulness and care, and it's interesting. I went to the public sneak of it, and they had like the Q&A from South by Southwest after like just broadcast, so I stayed for a little bit of that and listened to that, and it was interesting hearing them talk about how like they made this in a warehouse that wasn't even really a soundstage, meaning that like when it was raining or there was traffic noise, they had to just like pause and just hope for it to go away. And like, so it was not, you know, it was like what they were saying was a very shoestring production. And of course, that kind of always gets emphasized, right, in these Q&As. But I have to say, for whatever budget this was, I'm sure it was small. It looks really good. I mean, like the effects look good. Like for the, you know, there's like, it's a really good judicious application of like, okay, there are some computer effects here, but they're used sparingly enough that it feels like they maybe spent the money to make a few really good ones rather than a bunch of really crummy ones. And then they do a lot of neat, like there's some neat practical effects. There's some really
the fake face hugger.
There's like a creepy crawly creature that's pretty solid. So it is like, I don't know, I just thought it was like a pretty decent work of special effects invention and art direction and cinematography as a story, and I really like Isa Gonzalez a lot. I think she's
I looked it up. It's Asa.
Sorry, apologies.
Yes.
I feel like she follows randomly a buddy of mine on Twitter who's like, you know, a cool guy and talks about movies, but he's not like a screenwriter, you know?
Right.
And we were both DMing being like, why is she following you? I was like, I would be so nervous if some hot actress was following me on Twitter. It would be great actually, because then I would just stop posting forever.
Yeah, no posts anymore.
So I like her a lot. I liked her in the Guy Ritchie movie last year, Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. I think she's in another one of his coming up. But even as someone like me who generally thinks she's like cool and charismatic, she doesn't have that. And same thing with Aaron Paul. I think he's cool and charismatic. Neither of them have that much to do from an acting point of view. And like,
no, well, because this movie plays. You don't play video games, so I feel like another layer of derivativeness is like if you ever played a horror survival sci-fi game, this movie is very akin to that. Yeah, it's like including like the like what you would call like an NPC showing up, and you just have to like interact with them like the way Aaron Paul is, like a non-playable character. You know what I mean? Like it very much plays like that more so than it plays like a movie with written characters. It's like, no, here's a person in a video game on a mission that you have to do, and you're trying to solve what happened, and it's very video gamey too. So
it also reminded me of, I don't know if this might be, I don't know if this is too old a reference for you.
Yes.
The music video for "Smack My Bitch Up" by the Prodigy.
Oh sure, yeah.
I was like, oh, there's a little bit of that video in here, and it made me think of how that director like did some movies but didn't really go anywhere.
That wasn't like Romanek, was it?
No, it was Jonas Ackerlund. You remember you ever see the movie Spun about being on crystal meth?
Yeah, of course. That was a blockbuster DVD classic.
Yeah.
He also did Lords of Chaos.
I've never seen Lords of Chaos. Is it good? Is it as good as Spun?
It's fucked up. It's like really dark. It's about 1990s like black metal, but I feel like it's people who end up doing a bunch of crimes in the name of black metal. It's got it's got the scary Culkin in it. Rory Culkin.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that he was the scary one. I love.
Well,
that.
if you see Lords of Chaos, you'd start calling him that.
Yeah,
you'd call him the scary one. Yeah, he's also in Scream, so he's the Scream King one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I've actually only ever seen Spun of Jonas Ackerlund's feature films. I've seen, of course, many of his music videos.
Oh, I saw this one with fucking Mads Mikkelsen too. Polar.
Oh, Polar. Yeah. Maybe my wife
Netflix
really.
movie, yeah.
Yeah, that's weird. This is one of those movies where I'm not 100% sure if I've seen it, but I don't think I have. And my wife is a big Hannibal head, so I feel like maybe we're gonna watch this now. We're gonna watch it for Jonas Ackerlund and Mads Mikkelsen.
Smack my bitch up completionist.
Yeah. That video was so cool when you were whatever age I was when that came out. Probably slightly too old to be to be impressed by it.
I remember when Scary Movie 2 used that song. During
man,
their Matrix parody, I believe it was.
Yeah,
iconic.
So maybe I was just feeling the nostalgia when this movie started busting out some of the "Smack My Bitch Up" moves. I was like, oh sweet, I remember this from 1998. Like, and that's at least I guess that's part of it is like in terms of like going, oh yeah, it's not just Alien, it also is Prometheus and The Thing and Event Horizon, and then this music video and video games. I was like, at least what it's pulling influences, it's not quite as maybe I'm just easy on it because so many movies their influences are going, oh, can we make it like the Goonies? Like, so I was like, all right, this is at least pulling from a lot of different things derivatively. It's not anything really special, but I did find it fun enough to say, all right, I give it.
Would you recommend people go check it out if it's playing near them, or wait for the Shudder?
Yeah, actually, I would say if you're, it's not like drop everything you're doing, still probably see
quit your job right now and go.
Yeah, if they won't let you see Ash first showtime, I mean. It'll be on Shudder, right? Like in a couple weeks, I think.
Well,
but
they do the. It's a little later. It's like they do they do a paid VOD window for a bit, and then it comes.
Oh, okay.
Shudder. Yeah.
Yeah, in that case, I would say, especially if you got the Stubbs thing, like it's totally a decent little night out at the movies. It's 95 minutes, feels a little long even at 95 minutes, but that's fine. So yeah, I would of the three this week, this is the one I would say I think is probably most likely to be enjoyable in a movie theater.
All right. Yeah, like I'm halfway there. It's like a 2.5 star thing for me where I'm like, all the things you liked, I liked too. Like I think the filmic elements, the way the art design, the way he shot it, it's all very cool. There's just like 40 minutes of story in like a 90-minute movie.
That's a good way of putting it. That's very true. It doesn't really have 90 minutes. That's why it feels a little long, because it doesn't really have 90 minutes worth of story to tell.
Yeah, but if you like all the movies referenced and you want to see like someone doing their spin on it, like it'll do, but it also made me just want to watch all the movies referenced. Like, oh, I should watch Event Horizon again. It's been a while. Oh, I should watch,
or like Sunshine, the Danny Brown movie. That's a really good one.
Fuck yeah.
I don't even know if he's even into that one, but I was like, I still thought about that during this.
I watched that recently because there was a discourse online at some point about how that movie wasn't available to stream or pay for on digital even. So I was like, oh, I have the Blu-ray. I'll fire it up because then take advantage of the fact that I have it. And then I fired up the Blu-ray, and I forgot the fact that the Blu-ray is like a famously fucked up disc where it just plays like picture-in-picture commentary over like every other scene. It'll just be like, boop, here's Cillian Murphy in the corner to talk you through something.
Oh, weird.
And you can't turn it off.
That's wild.
So I watched the movie like that, and then like weeks later, it was like, now it's available on digital. So I bought it again on digital. But yeah, that movie fucking rocks. Even if you're watching it with picture-in-picture every 10 minutes, it was still pretty good.
He had his Academy Award. Why wouldn't you want to just see?
Yeah, I want to see what he's got to say about it. But yeah, Ash 2.5 for me, but it's like the most affectionate 2.5 possible. Where it's like I'm not dissuading anybody. I'm just saying it's a little thin, but it's got the juice in other ways. Jesse liked it more. There you have it. Next up, we have the Sam Raimi-produced Locked. And I feel like it's worth mentioning because Sam Raimi's produced things, at least recently. I feel like he used to put his name on things that I was definitely much less interested in and they were not as good. Like, what's that one we saw with Sandra Oh that had his name on it?
Oh.
Do you remember what the fuck that was?
No.
But it exists, right?
Oh, yeah, the Uma, right? Uma.
Yeah. That was a Raimi-produced thing. That's kind of the stuff I would put... I don't know, like that kind of a shitty horror movie. I was like, that's what he produces.
Ghost House or whatever it was did a bunch of bad movies.
Yeah, well, those, like, I always used to be like, yeah, no, Sam Raimi gets me interested, but like there's a whole class of ones I don't like. But now there's a whole class of productions where I would say the whole idea is high concept premise done crazily, and this one is exactly that. It's about a guy who tries to steal something from a car and then gets locked in that car by its malicious owner who wants to like punish him for being a robber. And I thought it was hilarious. And then he just did a Netflix he produced something for Netflix called Don't Move.
Right.
Yeah, where a woman
similar type of thing.
Yeah, hit with a paralytic agent and she can't she's trying to like get us escape from a killer before it takes effect. So and then
his next movie, Send Help, sounds like it's kind of the same deal. Like
he's actually directing that one, thankfully.
Yeah. The one where with Rachel McAdams called Send Help, where she's going to be like stranded on an island with
it was what was the
Misery situation.
It was Castaway meets something Misery.
Yeah,
maybe?
Misery.
That's what it was?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's so I was thinking the same thing. It's cool that he's got, it's kind of, and that's not that different from
Don't Breathe, high concept.
Don't Breathe, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Where it's kind of a limited location, like you said, kind of high concept. And
Crawl, arguably, too.
Yeah, Crawl has a bit of that. I feel like he is kind of zeroing in on in kind of the post Ghost House era, kind of going, oh, well, this is the kind of genre exercise I like to see, rather than the kind of generic ghost movies. I've been looking at his Ghost House movies, the Messengers, the Possession, the Grudge remake that sucks shit, the other Grudge remake that sucks shit,
the Boogeyman, that really terrible one.
Yes, the earlier, the one that doesn't even have Sophie Thatcher. What's it called? 30 Days of Night is okay, but it's still not as good as you would hope it would be. And so it's cool that he's kind of focusing on a more effective. Certainly, these movies on average are much better.
It makes sense too, if more so if he were to direct them, because these are such in his wheelhouse of limited premise that you can invigorate with clever camera work, and it's fun to see that he still produces those types of things and lets these other presumably younger directors try to take
a shot at it.
Yeah.
That said,
you do wish for him.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, during Locked was a little strenuous for me. I mean, I thought it was fine, and I was certainly pretty entertained by it. And again, this one I did see on a screener at home, so maybe this is maybe you flip how I saw this in Ash, and maybe I end up liking Locked better. But it's again, I just didn't. I like it. They do a fair amount of inventive stuff with with how the premise develops in terms of this guy is locked in the car and Anthony Hopkins is talking to him and making some demands of him, and then they mix it up a little bit. I know what Marissa always says, because we watch a bunch of these at home together, because they are the kind of movies that are kind of fun to watch as a Saturday night, Friday night type of movie at home if you can't go out. She always says it's really depends on how clever you can get in terms of throwing a curveball into it or whatever.
Sure.
And I didn't feel like this one had the cleverest, curviest curveballs. There's a whole thing about but what if he turned the heat way up? And then what if he turned the heat off? And I was like, all right. I feel like I get it. I don't know if I need both of those examples. And not to nitpick, but I'm no car can give you sub-zero temperatures.
No, they imply that he pimped it out himself.
He's like he's done his own rigging on it.
He called Exhibit to come over and pimp
it out. Yeah. And like the cars I Pimp My Ride, that thing will not drive for longer than a few weeks. It's gonna fall apart immediately. And like he turns on the heat, and I'm like, well, wouldn't this start melting stuff? If it was really that high, whatever. But that's secondary. And the reason I was even asking those questions is because it's not that exciting. It's like pretty good for a movie that's set mostly in a car, but it didn't go quite far enough for me in terms of like, ooh, this is a really interesting. I mean, and I honestly felt that way about Don't Move to a degree, but Don't Move did a little more. Was a little more devious in terms of the situations it was puts the heroine in, so it was kind of like, okay, that gets a pass for me.
You didn't like the Saw movie set in a car with Jigsaw as Anthony Hopkins as Jigsaw? I
do love Anthony Hopkins as Jigsaw. In fact, he is the highlight because I love his voice. I love his, when he does his kind of. I'm trying to think of a good word to do the example where, when he gets kind of spitting mad at people, kind of like where he gets like hissing at people. Love that. Love a condescending Anthony Hopkins who flies into a rage. So that and for that matter, Bill Skarsgård is pretty good too. Like they're both fine. And I was with this movie and didn't really dislike it, but I read that it's from an Argentinian movie, and that I think this is
4x4.
Yes, and I might be mistaken, but I feel like it's actually been remade by a few different countries at this point, and I kind of felt that in it, even though I had never seen any of the other ones. I was like, this kind of feels a little played out. Like, this kind of feels like it's been driven a few times before, to use the bad Gene Shalit pun. Like, it just kind of feels a little like, okay, I guess at this point you need to change it up so the car's going to move. And then at this point, maybe someone's going to get in the car with him. And, it's none of it's bad. I just wasn't that wild about it. And it, I like the kind of, it's very Saw 6, it's like some of the more socially conscious Saws.
I was going to say, you didn't like the class commentary, you didn't like the pontificating on how the world has lost its way, everyone's a criminal or homeless.
Right, and that stuff is kind of good, and like, certainly it makes it's an interesting way to make this Skarsgård character more sympathetic, is that even though he is this kind of petty thief, when he's like, when he and Hopkins are yelling back and forth, he does make some good points about class separation and how hard it is to get ahead and all that stuff. But I feel like, and even the Hopkins character, and I feel like a lot of movies have done this recently. It's not this movie's fault, but like the thing of like, having the bad guy talk about, be very transparently give conservative talking points, about how, the homeless, and like, it's not that I don't agree that those belong in the mouth of a villain. It's just that it's a little hacky. It's like, having the bad guy say, "Oh, am I gonna get canceled?" Like, is almost as hacky as actually joking about it. You know what I mean? Like, I just kind of like, why are we having Anthony Hopkins in here talking about like, you're going to cancel me, aren't you? Ha ha! And it's like, okay,
you see, that's the type of shit where I'm like, ha ha! He said Anthony Hopkins said he's gonna cancel me. It's like that tweet, Rob Delaney tweet with Mitt Romney watching The Phantom Menace every time Jar Jar Binks comes on screen. Haha, terrific. That's me. That's me. I mean,
certainly Hopkins sells it for sure. Like, so it's not unenjoyable.
You gonna cancel me, my dear boy?
Yeah, exactly. It's fun enough, but I wasn't. I don't know. Like as with Ash, which I enjoyed more. This is like a 95-minute movie where I was sort of like, boy, this is taking a while. Yeah. even though I was like objectively not at all.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it's fine. You liked it a little more though. I think you had a better time with it.
I mean, for no deeper reason other than the things I'm saying, where it's like the things that you thought were silly, I'm like laughing because I'm like, haha, this is silly.
So
that's fine. And like his motivation is probably just pretty boring stuff, like pretty boilerplate, like avenging what he's doing.
Yeah, he gets interrupted very early on before he gets out with it why he's doing this, and like it doesn't matter because you're like, yeah, I know, you don't even need to finish. And
like the reference I was going to make, he makes like, I'm like, oh, it's like Batman. He's like, oh, like Batman.
Yeah.
The Cape Crusader. I'm doing a really bad Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He's deceptively difficult. I feel like he would be someone who's really good at impression should do. I feel like I've never seen anyone.
I don't
him,
think
but
he's
he
ever
does have a
said "my
very
dear
specific...
boy" ever. And
Yeah,
I keep throwing
I'm
it in
sure
there.
he has. Actually.
It's the
I'm
only
sure,
way to
yeah.
do it for me.
Yeah, he just says that every line.
Yeah.
No,
You're locked in the car, aren't you, my dear boy?
It did make me think that if the Saw thing is starting over or up for grabs or the rights go on the block, they should hurry up. Anthony Hopkins is 87. Tobin Bell is, I mean, he's probably older than Tobin Bell, but I know Tobin Bell is like getting up there and was not sure if he could necessarily play Jigsaw in a leading role. Maybe we get Anthony Hopkins to play Jigsaw for real in a rebooted Saw, a really prestigious Saw with Academy Award winners playing Jigsaw. This is a good dry run for that. I'm not sure if it's much better than that. It's better than a couple of the actual Saw movies. I'll say that.
Wow. Okay. So that's not high praise. Those are all great films. We love the Saw franchise. There's something to love in all of them. So yeah, it's fun to watch Hopkins be goofy and silly. It's fun to watch. Again, it's just him being Jigsaw and torturing somebody, but via like radio in the car.
Yeah.
It's silly. It delivered what I wanted from it. Don't expect too much from it, obviously, because it is what it is. But I had a good time with it. If the premise sounds like a Saw movie in a car with Anthony Hopkins as Jigsaw, and like if you know that it's limited to that and that's all it is, you may have a good time. Because I had a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, I pretty like as with Ash, I pretty much agree. I pretty much agree with you. I just didn't like it quite as much.
Right on. We're inverse on those two. All right. Now, Hood Witch. This is something that I found really just fun and clever and propulsive, and appreciated the it's a metaphor about modern day witch hunts. And then it's like, no, it's a literal witch hunt. They are hunting this woman down. Like, I appreciated the ways this movie surprised me. And I think you also were surprised by it.
Yeah, I was surprised. I saw the log line I read because I just watched it on your recommendation, and the log line was just like a woman who imports exotic illegal animals is basically accused of being a witch, and people like chase her around. So I think I was actually expecting something a little pulpier, a little more like crazy, and it's actually this sort of I wouldn't say kitchen sink drama because it's a little more heightened than that, but there is kind of it's more of a domestic drama in some ways. It is definitely a thriller, and it's like the thing I found most interesting about it is the way it takes horror elements and kind of makes them not horror, or sort of makes them more realistic. I mean, like I feel like what I was thinking
like,
about,
what would witchcraft look like in a real world situation where like people don't believe in it, but like there's people who do believe in it and they practice it. So what does that look like?
Yeah. Right. The sort of, and that's very interesting. And then especially it's very hard to do a story about witch hunts and witches, which is not, I mean, this does not actually have like genuine witch magic in it. I don't think that's a spoiler to say. But it's hard to do a story about witch hunts in a horror context, because the temptation is, of course, always to like make the witch real, because that's cooler to see than like just seeing an innocent person persecuted and burned at the stake. But then when you do that, you're kind of saying that the witch hunt isn't entirely wrong, or you know what I mean? Like that's whenever you try to do revisionist kind of even fiction about Salem witch trials or whatever, you can't make them real witches. I mean, you can, people have, but when you make them real witches, then it kind of like
defeats
into
the purpose of the messaging.
Yeah,
right?
It validates the witch hunt in a weird way. I mean, obviously, nothing validates killing person, but like,
well, if they're a witch, maybe, I don't know.
Depending on a witch by witch basis. Yeah. That's what it does. It validates the discussion of whether or not to kill somebody for being a witch, which not really what you're supposed to be doing. And I think the Eggers movie, The Witch, got around that in a clever way by having her drawn into witchcraft because she's being accused of it. Like, she just kind of says, fuck it, if I'm going to be ostracized and being assumed to be a witch, then like maybe I should embrace this, Black Phillip and all that. That did it very cleverly, but then of course that's done already. So it's hard to do a thing. And this movie finds a really interesting way into it, which is having someone who's not like a supernatural witch, but is sort of adjacent to that world, a sort of like in kind of a religious way, and then having them be, so you of course don't want her to be persecuted, and if anything, I feel like the movie maybe stretches belief by like the way that, I mean, maybe not, I don't know, the way that people mobilize against her is very exacting and relentless in a way that maybe, I don't know, I guess that, I mean, obviously it's supposed to be the way that social media can like radicalize and mobilize people. Part of me was like, wouldn't they like do this for like a day and then lose interest?
Like the angry mob with pitchforks can't last that long, right? Like,
right. Like
we'll wait them
they
out.
would get distracted because they would be on their phones and find something else, you know.
But yeah, it's
not.
fun as like a commentary about social media witch hunts and shit like that. But then like I appreciated it more for the horror element of like, no, go back to like the frogs that are deadly that you're buying to sell to people, and the app you use to connect people to shamans. Like, there's so much interesting stuff in here.
Yeah, it is, and that is part of what's interesting about it, is that it doesn't really involve anything supernatural, and yet it has a lot of, like you said, it's like takes a lot of that stuff and puts it into a modern context. Like, okay, and I'm saying what if, but maybe, for all I know this exists, but like, what if if people did believe this certain thing, then what would they, what would the app look like, and how would people react to it? And yeah, of course there would be like hysteria. People get hysterical about genuine things like vaccines, so of course people would also get hysterical about like using different animals to whatever, create weird potions or whatever. I found it maybe a little bit like, I feel like I kind of wished it had heightened a little bit more, or like I feel like it's kind of like Ash, where it kind of is a danger of heightening too soon, because this mob is like chasing after her after like 30 or 40 minutes, and then it has to kind of slow down a little bit, and like it doesn't like it doesn't kind of like build and build and build. Of course the very end of it is, the last like 30 minutes is probably the most suspenseful bit of it, which is good, because like I said, a lot of movies like this peter out before then. But it is like, it sometimes did for me kind of fall in a weird in-between zone, where it's kind of a thriller and it's kind of heightened, but it's not like a supernatural horror movie. But I mean, a lot of even what I found unsatisfying about it was very interesting. Like what they were doing with this stuff is like, it's very unlike any movie I could think of, in terms of like what it's doing is very strange and unlike other horror movies, other thrillers. Like, it kind of, initially, I think I thought it was going to be more like that Outbreak movie we watched like last year. I forget what it was called. It was Mads, right? Where there's like a zombie outbreak. I kind of thought when the mob starts chasing her, I kind of thought it was going to be more like that for like the rest of the movie, which I'm sure could be wearying. But then it kind of ebbs and flows a little more in a way that makes it like maybe not as visceral as I was thinking it was going to be early on, but still very interesting. And like, yeah, it's just like it's an interesting weird. What did you make of, like, Marissa asked about this because we were watching it together. Hoodwitch is not like the French. It's not the translation of the French title.
What's the French title?
The French title is, I don't know what, I think it actually refers to that sect of Islam that they're talking about, the religion that they're the kind of
I thought it was. I mean,
religion.
I definitely thought it was a bad title.
Yeah, well, it's like an interesting title, but not maybe for this movie. It's like a weird. It's like, I was thinking, Marissa was like, do they understand what any of those were, like what Hoodwitch would conjures, or like what it means, or like what you would think of? It's not, I can see it's almost the right title, but I feel like they didn't quite nail it. I don't know. Anyway, that's a minor thing, but yeah, it's a very interestingly strange movie, I thought. How did you like? Is this just on the new release calendar? I had like never heard of this until you recommended it.
Yeah, I don't know. It was in my inbox for a while, and I thought the title was interesting. I thought it was more horror for sure, but it ended up being interesting in its own way. Yeah, a movie about a woman smuggling exotic animals and making a living, selling them to people who do believe in the stuff she doesn't believe in. There's just like so much interesting stuff. It's really dark, but yeah, maybe it gets a little too like, it's about this, it's about that. Because it does make a turn that be like, okay, so it's about witch hunts and how that can happen even easier online versus maybe in the old days. I don't know. A lot of interesting stuff. And the lead, who Golshifteh Farahani, who I've definitely seen in stuff. She's the girlfriend in Patterson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say she looks super familiar. We kept saying that she looked like Rose, like Rose Byrne, but she's not. Obviously not. She's in a lot of. She's stuff. Very good at it. This is the difficult part, that she has to kind of make it grounded, but there's also parts where she's like screaming in a vengeful rage, understandably, given some of what happens. So it's a definitely a kind of, I feel like some of the other performances weren't quite up to this level. Like the guy who plays her ex-husband, or the father of her son, I thought was like a little two-dimensional. Maybe by necessity, I don't know.
Oh
But,
yeah, just the abusive husband shit. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just like he's just like he's not that interesting, like, as a kind of as a mean guy. But but she's really good and makes the movie, and she like really has to navigate a kind of crazy tone of the movie that she does really well.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin too much, but if that movie's playing near you, you should go see it. I think it's also on VOD, so you can definitely rent that one right now, I believe. And
Yes.
hey, look, we talked about 3 movies and did a whole ass episode with news in under an hour. I don't think anyone will be mad at that. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next week with The Woman in the Yard, a movie that, by all intents, by all signs point to, it's great. Universal loves it.
I'm keeping the faith. I'm hoping
keeping the
it's the return, his first horror movie since Orphan, so I'm very excited about that.
Very excited. We'll be back next week with that very exciting episode. Bye.
Death is not the end. Beginning of a new flesh. The new flesh.
Horror lifestyle.
Forgive me if I don't stay around to watch. I just can't cope with freaky stuff.